Pay attention to the engine company pulling up to the warehouse on Lamont Street. It's 11:47 p.m. on October 3rd. The dispatcher reported smoke visible from the second floor. The building had been condemned for 6 years. No power, no water, no legal occupants. This should have been a routine investigation. Clear the structure, confirm the source, get out. Engine 47's captain was a 22-year veteran named Frank Donovan. He'd worked hundreds of abandoned building calls. Most were false alarms. Some were homeless encampments with makeshift heating. A few were arson. None of them were like this. At 11:52 p.m., Donovan and his crew forced entry through the south door. The smoke was light, not the black chemical churn of a real fire. It smelled wrong, organic, almost sweet. They climbed to the second floor. What they found in the northwest corner wasn't smoke damage. It was a room, furnished, heated, occupied. The walls had been insulated with foam panels. There was a space heater running off a stolen electrical line tapped from the building next door. A camping cot, bottled water, canned food stacked against the wall, and in the center of the room, a laptop computer connected to a portable Wi-Fi hotspot. On the screen, a live stream video feed. It showed a woman. She was sitting on a concrete floor in what appeared to be a basement. Her hands were bound. Her mouth was taped. She wasn't moving. Donovan radioed dispatch immediately. Within 18 minutes, Columbus Police Department had cordoned off the entire block. The woman on that screen was 29-year-old Julia Brennan. She had been missing for 11 days. Julia Brennan was a freelance graphic designer who worked from her apartment in the Short North District. She had no enemies, no stalkers, no dangerous ex-boyfriends. She was cautious, organized, and maintained a small, close circle of friends. On September 22nd, she posted on Instagram about finishing a logo design for a local brewery. The post showed her workspace, clean desk, coffee mug, her tortoiseshell cat asleep on the windowsill. It was the last thing she would ever post. That evening, Julia left her apartment at approximately 6:15 p.m. Security footage from her building showed her carrying a canvas tote bag and wearing a gray cardigan. She was heading to meet a client at a coffee shop 3 blocks away. She never arrived. By 9 p.m., her best friend Alicia Vasquez had called her 6 times. Julia always answered. Always. When the calls went straight to voicemail, Alicia drove to Julia's apartment. The lights were off. The door was locked. The cat was crying inside. Alicia called the police at 9:34 p.m. The missing persons investigation began immediately. Julia's phone had been turned off at 6:23 p.m., 8 minutes after she left her building. The last cell tower ping placed her near the intersection of High Street and 5th Avenue. Detectives canvassed the area. They pulled traffic camera footage. They interviewed every business owner within a 6-block radius. No one had seen her. Her client, the one she was supposed to meet, didn't exist. The email address was fake. The coffee shop had no reservation under that name. Julia had been lured out of her apartment by someone who knew exactly how to make the meeting seem legitimate. By September 25th, the Columbus police had expanded the search to neighboring counties. Julia's photo was distributed to news outlets. Her family held a press conference. Alicia created a Facebook page that was shared 14,000 times. There were no credible leads. Julia Brennan had simply vanished. Frank Donovan had seen a lot in 2 decades of firefighting. But standing in that makeshift room on the second floor of an abandoned warehouse, staring at a laptop screen showing a woman bound and helpless, he felt something he rarely experienced on the job. Fear, not for himself, for her. The video feed was live. The timestamp in the corner of the screen confirmed it. 11:54 p.m., October 3rd. Wherever Julia Brennan was, she was there, right now. Detective Lucas Moreno arrived on scene at 12:11 a.m. He was a 15-year veteran of CPD's Major Crimes Unit. He'd worked abductions before. He knew the first 72 hours were critical. Julia had been missing for 11 days. Moreno photographed everything in the room. The laptop was still running. The video feed was still active. Whoever had set this up had left in a hurry, or hadn't expected to be discovered. The computer forensics team arrived at 12:40 a.m. They isolated the laptop from the network without shutting it down. If they could trace the video feed, they could find Julia. The feed was coming from an IP address registered to a cellular hotspot. The hotspot was mobile, but the data stream showed a consistent connection for the past 9 hours. Whoever was broadcasting wasn't moving. By 1:15 a.m., the tech team had narrowed the location to a 3-square-mile area in southwest Columbus. Moreno mobilized every available unit. The cellular signal triangulation pointed to an industrial area near Harrisburg Pike. The zone included a shuttered automotive plant, 2 storage facilities, and a cluster of small commercial properties that had been foreclosed during the recession. It was a ghost district, perfect for hiding someone. At 2:03 a.m., patrol units began a grid search. They moved methodically, checking every building, every lot, every vehicle. At 2:47 a.m., Officer Denise Caldwell spotted a white cargo van parked behind a defunct machine shop. The van's windows were tinted. The license plate didn't match the vehicle registration. She called it in. Moreno arrived 4 minutes later with a tactical unit. The van was unlocked. Inside, they found rope, duct tape, zip ties, and a steel toolbox containing sedatives, syringes, and a stun gun. But no Julia. The machine shop's rear door had been forced open. The lock was broken. Fresh scratches marked the frame. The tactical team entered at 2:56 a.m. The building was dark. The power had been shut off years ago. They moved through the first floor with flashlights, empty offices, stripped machinery, broken windows. The basement entrance was in the northwest corner, behind a rusted metal door. It wasn't locked. Moreno descended the stairs. The air was cold and damp. The smell hit him immediately. Mildew, rust, and something sharper. Human waste. At the bottom of the stairs was a single bare bulb, powered by a portable generator. And beneath that bulb, sitting on the concrete floor with her hands bound and her mouth taped, was Julia Brennan. She was alive. Julia was transported to Riverside Methodist Hospital at 3:22 a.m. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from hypothermia. But she was conscious. She could speak. She told detectives everything. On the evening of September 22nd, she had been walking to the coffee shop when a man approached her on the street. He was in his mid-30s, average height, wearing a dark jacket. He asked if she was Julia. She said yes. He said he was her client, that he'd decided to meet her halfway instead of at the shop. She hesitated. Something felt wrong. Before she could react, he grabbed her arm and pressed something into her side. She felt a sharp electric jolt. Her legs gave out. He caught her, guided her into a van parked at the curb, and drove away. No one saw it happen. Julia woke up in the basement. Her hands were bound. Her mouth was taped. The man told her he'd been watching her for weeks. He knew her schedule. He knew where she lived. He knew she worked alone. He said she was perfect. For 11 days, Julia was held in that basement. The man visited twice a day, once in the morning, once at night. He brought her food and water. He never hurt her. He never touched her. He just watched, and he filmed. Julia described the setup: a laptop on a folding table, a webcam pointed at her, a portable Wi-Fi hotspot running off a battery pack. He told her he was streaming the footage to a private server. He said people were watching. He said they were paying. Moreno had seen this before. Dark web, live abduction streams. It was rare, but it existed. The man had made one mistake. He'd set up a second location, the warehouse on Lamont Street, as a monitoring station. He could watch the feed remotely, track viewers, collect payments. But he'd gotten careless. He'd left a space heater running. The insulation had overheated. The smoke had triggered a neighbor's call to 911. If the fire department hadn't responded when they did, Julia would have remained hidden. By 8 a.m. on October 4th, detectives had a description, a vehicle, and a digital trail. The hunt was on. His name was Owen Hatcher. He was 36 years old, a former IT contractor who'd been fired from 3 jobs in 5 years for inappropriate conduct. He lived alone in a rental house in Grove City. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, but his digital footprint told a different story. The forensic team analyzing the laptop from the warehouse uncovered a hidden partition on the hard drive. It contained folders labeled with dates and names. Inside were videos, photographs, and detailed surveillance logs. Julia Brennan wasn't his first victim. There were 4 others, all women, all ages 25 to 32. All freelancers or remote workers who lived alone. All had been reported missing in Ohio over the past 14 months. None of them had been found. Moreno pulled the case files. The missing women were Tamara Sullivan, age 28, from Cleveland; Kristen Ward, age 30, from Akron; Angela Price, age 27, from Dayton; Brenda Moss, age 31, from Toledo. Each had vanished after responding to a work-related message. Each had last been seen in a public place. Each had simply disappeared. The videos on Hatcher's drive showed them in the same basement where Julia had been held. The same setup, the same camera angle, the same cold, clinical documentation, but none of the women were visible in recent footage. Moreno feared the worst. At 11:15 a.m., a SWAT team surrounded Hatcher's residence. He was inside. He surrendered without incident. The interrogation began at 1:30 p.m. Owen Hatcher sat across from Detective Moreno in interview room 3. He was calm, almost detached. He answered questions in a flat monotone, as if discussing a technical problem rather than a series of abductions. Moreno asked about the other women. Hatcher said nothing. Moreno showed him the surveillance logs, the videos, the names. Hatcher said nothing. Finally, Moreno asked the only question that mattered: where are they? Hatcher leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he smiled. They're not coming back. Owen Hatcher refused to provide locations. He refused to explain what had happened to the 4 missing women. He refused to cooperate in any form. But his digital records did what he wouldn't. The forensic team uncovered GPS coordinates embedded in metadata from photos on his laptop. The coordinates led to a rural property in Madison County, 43 acres of wooded land owned by a shell company registered in Hatcher's name. On October 7th, search teams mobilized. Cadaver dogs were deployed. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the property. At 4:15 p.m., the dogs alerted near a clearing in the northeast section of the woods. The ground had been recently disturbed. Excavation began immediately. By nightfall, they had recovered 4 bodies: Tamara Sullivan, Kristen Ward, Angela Price, Brenda Moss. All had been buried within the past year. The cause of death was consistent across all 4 victims: asphyxiation. Hatcher had kept them alive for weeks, sometimes months, streaming their captivity to paying viewers on the dark web. When the streams lost profitability, he ended their lives. Julia Brennan had been hours away from the same fate. Owen Hatcher was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of kidnapping, and 14 counts of human trafficking. His trial began on March 12, 2025. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the surveillance footage, the digital records, the forensic analysis, and Julia's testimony. The defense argued diminished capacity, a history of social isolation, untreated psychiatric disorders, and what they described as dissociative detachment from reality. The jury didn't buy it. The prosecutor's closing statement was direct and unambiguous. Isolation does not justify predation. Illness does not excuse cruelty. Owen Hatcher knew exactly what he was doing. He planned it. He executed it. He profited from it. On April 8, 2025, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Owen Hatcher was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He said nothing to the families of his victims. He was escorted from the courtroom in silence. Julia Brennan spent 3 months in intensive therapy. She moved out of her apartment. She changed her name. She stopped posting on social media, but she didn't stop living. In November 2025, she testified before the Ohio State Legislature in support of Senate Bill 204, a law requiring online platforms to implement enhanced monitoring for illegal live streaming content. The bill passed unanimously. Julia now works as an advocate for abduction survivors. She speaks at conferences. She consults with law enforcement on digital safety protocols. She is, by all accounts, rebuilding. The families of Tamara Sullivan, Kristen Ward, Angela Price, and Brenda Moss established a memorial fund in their names. The fund supports search and rescue operations for missing persons in Ohio. Frank Donovan, the fire captain who discovered the monitoring station, retired in June 2025. He said the case changed how he saw his job. Every call mattered. Every detail mattered. He was right. If Engine 47 had arrived 5 minutes later, if the smoke had dissipated, if the warehouse had been cleared without a second-floor check, Julia Brennan would have died in that basement. But they did arrive. They did check. They did find her. On October 3rd, 2025, 1 year after her rescue, Julia returned to the machine shop where she'd been held. The building had been demolished. In its place was a small memorial garden, funded by the Survivors Fund and maintained by the city. 4 benches, 4 plaques, 4 names. Julia placed flowers at each one. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Those women had been forgotten by their captor. They would never be forgotten again.